This is a watch you actually could wear inside out because the movement is so lovely. Entry-level models are often the first watches we buy from our favorite brands. Here are 10 entry-level models we have selected. It is worth mentioning that all the watches on this list are either automatic or have manual movements. And although some of the mentioned watch brands have watches with quartz movements that are even more affordable, we have chosen here to only have manual and automatic movements. We have also selected some pre-owned options to make this list even more interesting. So here are 10 different entry-level models from 10 different brands from $500 up to $5,500. First up on this list is a vintage Seamaster from one of the watch giants. There is almost no better and more affordable watch from a prestigious watch brand than a vintage Omega Seamaster. And the options between the countless different models that contain different dials, details, materials and different movements are many. It's also one of the models on this list that may require the most research from you if you are curious about watches, movements and watch history. This example we have here is an Omega Seamaster 14390 from the year 1960. A vintage Omega Seamaster can rarely go wrong in both an everyday outfit and a more dressy suit. Much because of the smaller size a vintage Seamaster has, which usually goes from about 33mm up to 36mm. It's such a versatile model if you prefer vintage watches. Number 2. Nivada Grenchen Super Antarctic from around $845. The Nivada Grenchen Super Antarctic is an exquisite watch and at the same time it is as versatile as a watch can be. The size is 38mm, so this is a model that can fit most wrists. If you have a smaller wrist it looks more sporty, and if you have a large wrist it can almost be mistaken for a vintage watch. And if you have a really big wrist we probably recommend a bigger watch. It's a watch that you can do the most everyday things with. The thickness is just about 11mm with a lug-to-lug measurement of just under 45mm. Almost all versions of the Super Antarctic come with a black dial, but you can choose between having index markers that have the Arabic numerals 3, 6 and 9, or have triangular index markings. You get an automatic movement with a power reserve of 38 hours, a screw-down crown. This one can be both slightly more dressed up or used as an everyday watch. And for just $845 on a rubber strap, it's an extremely good entry-level model. Number 3. Zodiac Olympos for $895. The Olympos is one of the Zodiac's historical models, which is based on the Manta model from 1961, which has a so-called manta ray shape on the case. It's a unique watch in the watch market, where it is difficult to create unique watches. Zodiac mainly manufactures diving watches, so the Olympus is the company's dressy watch. And if I may say so, a classic model even if it's an innovative model with an interesting case shape. It's also the most affordable watch you can get from the Zodiac company, and it will cost you just under $900. It comes in 4 different dial colors. This one is black, but you can also get a beige one in a gold color, and a novelty with a green dial. The size is approximately 37mm. and it sits roughly like a 37mm model on the wrist, possibly a bit smaller than that, with a lug-to-lug measurement of approximately 45mm. The movement is automatic and has a power reserve of 44 hours, and it has 50 meters of water resistance, so of course it's not as robust as the other diving watches from Zodiac. However, this is a dress watch that should not be used primarily as an everyday watch. We think the Zodiac Olympos is a cool, unique watch, and dare we say it, a timeless model. And if you want a classic dress watch but still want something a bit different, this Zodiac Olympos might be the one for you. Number 4. DOXA Sub 200 Whitepearl. Here we have an entry-level model from DOXA, which is the Sub 200. It's also one of the models from DOXA that looks a bit more like a traditional dive watch, if we would compare it to the typical case shape and design a DOXA Sub 300T has, or the 600T, which is the models that the company is best known for. This particular model has a stylish white dial with a steel link. It can also be had with a rubber strap, but since the price hardly differs between a rubber strap and a steel link, we would recommend that you choose a steel link for this model, which you get for around $950 in total. The case measures 42mm with a lug-to-lug measurement of approximately 46mm. So even though it is a full 42mm, you with slightly smaller wrists can probably pull this off. And if I would compare it to another watch size-wise, it would maybe be a 40mm Submariner. And this is how the bezel sounds like. The case is both polished and brushed, which is a positive, where the polishing and the design of the lugs are a little bit reminiscent of an Omega Seamaster diver. So if you like DOXA in general, but have a hard time for their traditional case design, this could be a good model. The water resistance is 200 meters, which a diver's watch should at least have, so you can easily wear this as a sports watch or an everyday watch, and also a great entry-level model. Number 5. Mido Multifort Powerwind for just over $1,000. The Mido Multifort Powerwind is a new model in an old shell, or an old shell in a new model. In any case, a recreated model that Mido first launched in the 1950s and is now back in Mido's catalog. It's also one of the Mido models that stands out, even though it can be seen as an entry-level model. I would argue, if I would buy a Mido watch right now, this would be one of the top of my list. Like the Nivada Grenchen Super Antarctic, it's a versatile watch that can work as an everyday watch, but with a few limitations. If you have a bit larger wrists, this can look like a dress watch. And the smaller the wrist you have, the more sporty it will look. But that's also the biggest strength of this model, and for some it could probably also be the only watch you own. The size is 40mm, but it sits more like a 39mm watch, and dare I say it, maybe even 38mm. For example, I have an Oris Big Crown in 38mm, which feels bigger than this watch, or as big as this Mido. The thickness is just over 12mm, with a lug-to-lug measurement of 47.3mm. The Mido Multifort Powerwind has 50 meters of water resistance, which is pretty good for a dress watch, but maybe not enough for an everyday watch. Here we have an incredibly beautiful blue dial, and one with a black sunburst dial. That comes with 3 Arabic numerals at 9, 12 and 3 o'clock. The case is nicely both polished and brushed, which isn't always the case in this price point, where we often have to choose between one or the other, either totally brushed or fully polished. Here you also get a comfortable and high quality link, which I would say reminiscent a bit of a Rolex dated. The movement has a power reserve of 80 hours and can also be seen from the back of the case. This Mido Multifort Powerwind is an affordable entry-level Swiss watch and costs a bit over $1,000. Number 6. Longines Conquest Heritage, which goes for $1,350. Here we have one of the absolute best vintage inspired models from a brand today, and once again one that can fit many wrist sizes. But as a watch that can be mistaken as a vintage watch, this is just a classy watch all around. The matte black dial is slightly lighter than what we usually get with the black dials, which creates a slightly more vintage look together with the gold colored index markings. The fully polished case measures 35mm with a lug-to-lug measurement of approximately 42mm, which sounds small, but I would say it is worn a bit larger than that measurement. For example, if I would compare this to a vintage Omega Seamaster in 34 or 35mm, this one would feel bigger than that. I'm not sure why that is, but probably the dial here is bigger than the case, if that makes sense. Something that stands out is the date window, located at 12 o'clock. And I remembered when this came out on the market, this was a bit controversial, but personally I don't mind it. Something else that strongly affects the vintage feel is the glass used. And it's not a sapphire glass, but an acrylic glass, which has a gorgeous box shape, which creates a thickness of around 11.7mm. It's a charming detail that, together with the size, the design and the dial, creates one of the best vintage inspired watches on the market today. At this price. Another nice and interesting detail is also the back of the watch, which shows a nice emblem. Inside the case we find the movement, which is automatic and has a power reserve of 38 hours. The water resistance is just 30 meters, so it's not a sportier model, but that's also not why this model was created, or why we like it. The Longines Conquest Heritage is a gorgeous dress watch from Longines that goes for around $1,350. Number 7. Vulcain Skindiver. Vulcain has come out with many interesting new models in recent years, with the Skindiver certainly being one of the most interesting, as it is a diving watch from one of the most unique cult companies from Switzerland, best known for their cricket president watch. The original model on which this Vulcain Skindiver is based came out in the 1960s, a decade known for creating many dive watches on the market we see today. Despite being a dive watch, it's one of the more elegant dive watches on the market, and a model that can easily be used as an everyday watch, much because of the more sleek design. Here we have the black version, which has a slightly matte dial and a slightly rounded glass that nicely suits this model. The size is 38mm, but it sits more like a 39mm watch on the wrist. For example, an Oris Aquis 39.5mm. Even though the lug-to-lug measurement is only 44.2mm, I can't explain why this sits a bit bigger on the wrist, but I think it can be linked to the thickness, which is only 12.2 millimeters. So it sits closer to the wrist, which I think can have this effect of it wearing a bit bigger. It has a water resistance of 200 meters and the movement is an ETA 2824 with a power reserve of 38 hours. And this is how the bezel sounds like. I quite like it. It has this sharp, light sound, which I like. It's crisp. I like crisp sounded bezels. The case is completely brushed except for the back and the edges of the case, which creates a nice combination of polished and brushed elements. It's otherwise easy for a fully brushed model to feel too sporty or as a field watch, and a fully polished one to be too elegant, and this could be used as both. Even though I would say no, it actually can. Yeah, it can. This is a wonderful entry-level model from Vulcain, and it goes for around $1,600, which is an excellent price for a slightly more discreet and elegant diving watch from a unique and historical brand. Number 8. The Rolex Air King from $2,000 and up. Here is one of the most interesting pre-owned and vintage watches on the market. If you are looking for an affordable and nice Rolex watch that still has that Rolex DNA. I mean, most Rolex watches have that Rolex DNA, but I think you know what I mean. It's a watch you can find at incredible good prices if you are looking for a vintage Rolex Air King. Right now, for example, at Chrono24, we can quickly see several models from around $2,000 and up. The differences between the modern version of a Rolex Air King and the vintage models are many. The size of the modern 40mm case, while a vintage Air King is around 34mm. And of course the dial, which is totally different. Like all Rolex sports models, it's as versatile as a watch can be. The Rolex Air King is a perfect entry-level model to the Rolex brand. You can easily find Air King watches from the 50s onwards at affordable prices and in good condition. As with the vintage Omega Seamaster, research here is of a great importance and something we recommend, of course, with any pre-owned watch purchases. Number 9. Bremont Argonaut RS for $3,695. If you're looking for a dive watch, it's good to know that it lacks an external rotating bezel and instead has an internal one. It's a matter of taste, but this solution is absolutely one of the more unusual ones. It's something that makes the 42mm size feels like a regular 42mm watch and not a 42mm dive watch, and therefore will best fit normal to slightly larger wrists. It's a different kind of dive watch that on the right wrist will not look as sporty as a classic diving watch. The movement has a power reserve of 42 hours and it's also chronometer certified. This is an entry-level model from the British company Bremont at the price of around $3,700. But that's nothing I can feel in the quality of the watch. In general, I think Bremont watches are of exceptional quality, and the quality of this Bremont Argonaut RS is as good as it gets. Number 10. Habring² Felix. Finally, we have our most expensive entry-level model on this list, which is the Habring² Felix. I probably show this watch in every list, at least that's how it feels. But I love this watch, I really love it. It's a model that for me, despite its relatively low price in Habring² terms, it's almost the best looking Habring² model out there, which is also why I mention it so often as I do. The size is 38.5mm, so this watch fits well on everything from slightly smaller to normal wrists. It's a model that doesn't need more than showing the time with a simple time display. The sub-dial with the second hand is nicely located at the 9 o'clock position. The dial has a nice visually brushed surface, and the dial color just shines from the wrist. And it gives the watch a classic and elegant expression. The Habring² Felix has a manual movement with 48 hours of power reserve that is manufactured in-house and is a real beauty to behold. Just this last point is one of the reasons I would like to get the watch, although on a different strap, because I don't like leather straps. This is a watch you actually could wear on the outside. No, how do you say? Inside out, because the movement is so lovely. It's simple but super lovely. It goes for around $5,500, depending on where in the world you live and your local currency, if you can get it at all. We have right now the beige one in stock. Sometimes you can feel that you miss out on functions when you buy entry-level models, but that's not something I feel with Habring² Felix. It's perfect as it is. So this was our entry-level watch list. This longer form content is not something we usually make. Did you like it? And did you like the watches we chose? If not, which are your favorite entry-level watches? Please let us know in the comments. And subscribe to our channel for more interesting watch content. Thanks for watching.